Hare Krishna. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all. Tonight, we are continuing with the Bhakti Shastri course. And tonight, we're continuing with the Nectar of Devotion. And we're up to chapter 14. And the chapter is entitled Devotional Qualifications. So it's an interesting chapter because since chapter 6 up until chapter 13, it's been a description of Vaiti Sadhana Bhakti. So Vaiti Sadhana Bhakti is the type of devotional service that we practice when we follow the rules and regulations of Bhakti. And that is something that we all follow in the beginning of our devotional service, because in the beginning of devotional service, it is based upon fear of not following the rules and regulations of Bhakti. That is the impetus for following devotional service. It's based on a certain amount of fear. Vaiti means rules. So Vaiti Sadhana Bhakti means rules. It's somewhat governed by fear, because we think if I don't do it, then I'll get a reaction, or something will be lacking, or I'll disobey the order of the spiritual master. So the impetus in the beginning is that we will follow based on a certain amount of fear, which is there. So that's the impetus to follow the Vaiti, or the rules and the regulations of sadhana bhakti. And we think that if I don't do it, then I won't make advancement, or it's not based on just wanting to serve Krishna, but it's based on a fear that we will be impacted negatively if we don't follow. So that's what we've been discussing. That's what the Nectar of Devotion has been discussing. Then there's this chapter, and this chapter is entitled Devotional Qualifications. And then the next chapter, which will begin next week, 15 and 16, those two chapters are discussing the subject of Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, which is the other type of sadhana. Now we have Vaiti Sadhana Bhakti, and then we have Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. So that's the other type of devotional service. It is called Raganuga, which is, we'll discuss next week, which is spontaneous devotional service. It's not based on a fear of following the rules and regulations, but rather it's based on the devotee feeling spontaneous attraction and attachment to Krishna. And he has agreed, lopa, to attain Krishna consciousness. So that will be the next two chapters, which will be after this. So this chapter is in between the sadhana bhakti discussion and the Raganuga sadhana discussion. And then chapter 17 we'll discuss Bhava Bhakti, 18, 19 we'll discuss Bhava, and then Prema Bhakti. So that will be the end of our study of the Nectar of Devotion, because that will be the eastern side of the ocean will be finished. And after we're finished discussing the eastern side of the ocean, then we'll have our exam, and then we'll move on to the Bhagavad Gita. Whereas there are three other sides of the ocean, the southern, the western, the northern side of the ocean, but they're not part of the Bhakti Shastri course. So we won't be touching on those subject matters. Okay, so devotional qualifications. This is chapter 14. At the end of chapter 13, Srila Rupa Goswami began to analyze the relation between various spiritual practices and pure devotional service. This continues in chapter 14, beginning with an analysis of jnana and vairagya. So we've been hearing about Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, and now we're about to hear an analysis of Jnana and Vairagya. Now, Jnana and Vairagya are mentioned within the Bhagavatam itself. Everything in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's all based on Srimad Bhagavatam. All of our philosophy, Chaitanya Charitamrita, everything is based upon the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam is an elaboration on the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. So everything is ultimately discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam. In Nectar of Devotion, we have this concept or this description of 9 levels of bhakti, which you'll be familiar with. So Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti, Bhava, and Prema. These 9 levels of bhakti. Now, those 9 levels come from Bhagavatam. Right? Canto 1, Chapter 2. Canto 1, Chapter 2 is so important, that chapter, Prabhupada said we should memorize the whole chapter. That's how important that chapter is. So many important verses. Savai Pumsam, Parodamo, Vasudeve, Bhagavati. The other verse, the other verses are slipping my mind right at this moment, but there are Nashtapraishu, Vabhadreshu, like very Shrimvatam Swa Kata Krishna. They're like essential verses that we need to know in our philosophy. Now, in that second chapter, from verses 12 to 20, that's where the description of the 9 levels of bhakti come from. Right? Rupa Goswami has taken it from there, and then he has included it within the Nectar of Devotion. So everything that's here in the Nectar of Devotion is coming from Bhagavatam. Now, that verse in the second chapter of the first canto, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayat Ahoitukam. It describes that when you practice devotional service to Krishna, then what automatically manifests is jnana and vairagya. Jnana means transcendental knowledge, knowledge related to Krishna, and vairagya means detachment from the material world. And Prabhupada describes in the Krishna book that attachment to Krishna, that manifests once we become detached from this material world. In other words, we can measure how advanced we are. Like, in other words, if our material desires are decreasing and our desire to serve Krishna is increasing, then we're making advancement. So that's like a barometer of bhakti. That's a simple way of understanding. Are we advancing? Because sometimes devotees ask this. Am I advancing in Krishna consciousness? Yes, you are advancing. If your material desires are becoming less and your spiritual desires are becoming greater, then yes, that's a very simple way of understanding whether or not we're advancing in Krishna consciousness. So it says that once you practice bhakti, jnana and vairagya manifest. Ahoituki means automatically. If you're practicing devotional service properly, you will be feeling a sense of detachment from this world. That's just the natural byproduct of practicing bhakti. Kleshagni means your miseries are destroyed. We've all felt this, especially when you first come to devotional service. We've all felt this. Your material desires just begin to dissipate. You just become disinterested in material things. And then if we don't maintain our original seriousness in devotional service, then gradually the material desires can come back. But in the beginning, we all experience, like, your material desires just begin to disappear. So that's the effect of bhakti, that vairagya will take place. Vairagya means detachment. You'll become detached. from this material energy. And you'll receive transcendental knowledge, your realizations about Krishna, realizations about bhakti. The more you practice devotional service, the more you will realize in relation to Krishna. So that is jnana. Jnana vijnana ashtikyam. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the jnana turns into vijnana. Vijnana means realization. That comes from practicing devotional service. So this chapter is speaking about jnana and vairagya, which are the byproducts of devotional service. There are places where it is described jnana and vairagya are said to be the sons of bhakti. Bhakti is sometimes described as being the mother. Bhakti Devi, like we say, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai when we're saying Prema Dwani prayers. Bhakti Devi. So sometimes it says the sons of Bhakti Devi are jnana and vairagya. She gives, when you practice devotional service, it gives birth to detachment and transcendental realizations. So jnana means cultivation of knowledge, and vairagya, cultivation of detachment, may preliminarily help a new devotee focus on Krishna by freeing him from distracting attraction to sense objects. So at least in the beginning, if we don't have a high level of detachment, we have to practice it. For example, many of us, when we first joined the temple, we entered into the brahmachari and brahmacharini ashram, which several of us did. Now, what's the point of entering into the brahmachari and brahmacharini ashram? It's to practice detachment. Right? We have to detach ourselves from this material energy. So sometimes you have to do it mechanically in devotional service, right? It may not just happen automatically. You may have to mechanically, situate yourself away from the opposite sex and from sense objects and opportunities for sense gratification. So it may be mechanical in the beginning. But if you do it mechanically, then gradually it will come. That natural feeling of detachment will come. But it's not always like that in the beginning. That's why it's called sadhana. It means practice. We have to practice being detached. However, the practice of jnana and vairagya does not fix the mind directly on Krishna. Rather, it is absorbed in philosophical discrimination between matter and spirit. So, in the beginning, we're trying to understand these basic points of spiritual life, like you're not the body, right? For us, that's not a realization. We haven't realized we are not the body. Right? We're trying to mechanically understand it. So we cultivate knowledge. We read the Bhagavad Gita, for example, and we hear these instructions and we practice detachment, we practice a lifestyle which helps to enforce the fact that we're not the body, but we haven't realized it yet. But that's part of the mechanical process of purifying oneself and extricating oneself from the material energy. Fixing the mind on Krishna is the most essential part of sadhana. Since jnana and vairagya fail to do so, they are not items of sadhana bhakti. That's an interesting point. The 64 items which have just been mentioned from chapters 6 to 13, those 64 items of bhakti help us to remember Krishna. But jnana and vairagya are not mentioned as the part of those 64. Right? They're not directly mentioned. I mean, you could say in the sense that we study Bhagavatam, that is jnana, but it's not specifically mentioned that we practice jnana in the sense of we're trying to differentiate between matter and spirit. That's not an anga of bhakti. However, they are supportive of bhakti. That's why we practice them. That's why we cultivate knowledge, and that's why we cultivate detachment, because it assists our bhakti. But it is interesting because Haridas Thakur describes this in the Harinam Chintamani, that bhakti is the means and the end of spiritual life, whereas jnana and vairagya are a means to the end. Right? You practice detachment so that you can become free of this material world, so that you can attain Krishna. But it is not in and of itself bhakti. And bhakti is the means and the end, which means you practice devotional service in practice here to attain perfection in devotional service in the spiritual world. Right? And the same activities, Prabhupada explains, in deity worship, all the activities of deity worship, they're the same as what you perform in the spiritual world. You make garlands here, you make garlands there. You cook for Krishna here, you cook for Krishna there. You bathe Krishna here, you bathe Krishna there. It's the same activities. So this is how we practice devotional service. We practice devotional service in this way. We follow the 64 items of bhakti, and that leads us to perfection, performing pure devotional service in the spiritual world. Whereas jnana and vairagya, they are means to the end, but you don't get to the spiritual world and you're not studying the difference between matter and spirit, because you are spirit. And you're not practicing or mechanically practicing detachment, because you're in the spiritual world. There's nothing to be detached from. So this is the difference. One is a means to the end, and the other one is the means and the end. Furthermore, they may be detrimental to the cultivation of devotion. Srila Rupa Goswami warns that jnana and vairagya can harden the heart. A materially attached person has many emotions that impel him towards sense gratification. Vairagya involves making the heart callous and indifferent to such emotions, so that they will not move us. So this is a very interesting point. It's mentioned by Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Devotion. The nature of bhakti is it makes the heart soft. That's another way we can see practically if we're advancing in Krishna consciousness. How soft is our heart? Do we have real compassion for other living entities? Right? That's an actual way to understand how advanced we are in Krishna consciousness. So one who puts too much emphasis on jnana and vairagya, the heart may become hard. We see that sometimes. People become jnanis. They become very learned, but sometimes with learning comes pride. And pride makes the heart hard. It makes one feel superior to others. I am a great learned scholar. Other people are untouchable. So you might develop that abhiman, or that mentality that I'm superior to others, and the heart becomes hard. And then you have vairagya. And vairagya means detachment. But too much detachment can also make the heart hard. And we see that sometimes. We see that When people, they try to be too detached, even amongst devotees, those practicing bhakti, they try to be too detached, but the heart becomes hard. A classic example is like when a brahmachari, because many of us practice brahmacharya. So we practice brahmacharya, but we had not given up our attachment to the opposite sex. So sometimes our heart became hard out of false renunciation or immature renunciation. We actually became hard-hearted towards the opposite sex. Sometimes we treat the opposite sex harshly because we weren't mature in our renunciation. So that's the danger of practicing devotional service, but not coming to the proper level or the mature level of devotion. Then sometimes you can become hard-hearted. Right? We see that in ourselves and others. A materially attached person has many emotions that impel him towards sense gratification. Vairagya involves making the heart callous and indifferent to such emotions so that they will not move us. So, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that if the renunciation is not mature, one becomes michyacha. Michyacha means pretension. Yeah, it means like you become a pretender. Krishna speaks about it in the beginning of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. In other words, beginning of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita speaks about action, because 3rd chapter is called Karma Yoga. So it means action. But sometimes we try to act on a platform that we're not, and Krishna says that is michyacha. Michyacha means you're a pretender. You dress up in saffron and you act like you're very renounced, but it's all a pretense. And your heart is actually hard. You're not actually mature in your bhakti. So we have to be careful that we don't practice devotional service like that. So, bhakti, however, means to please the Lord by our love for him. To express such love requires a soft heart. One easily moved by the Lord's name, form, qualities, and activities. Jnana and Vairagya are not favorable to devotional service because they result in a hard, stoic heart. So we have to see in ourselves, over time. Are we becoming more and more soft-hearted? Is our renunciation real? Is it balanced? And then we can judge, how we're advancing in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, sometimes we put on a false show. Right? So we need to advance properly in Krishna consciousness. And we have to analyze, is our heart actually becoming soft? And are we becoming naturally detached simultaneously from the material energy? Because someone who's very advanced in Krishna consciousness, they are detached automatically. Srila Rupa Goswami quotes Srimad Bhagavatam 11:20-31 to support this point. See Nectar of Devotion, page 113. Although the processes of Jnana and Vairagya are unfavorable to devotional service, the qualities of knowledge and detachment are necessary for devotional advancement. So, Prabhupada once said, very early on in the movement, he said to Umapati Prabhu, he said that the path of bhakti, while practicing the path of bhakti, we should not be too detached or too attached. Right? This is important. Prabhupada said, should follow the middle path. Not too much attachment, not too much detachment. Both are detrimental to our bhakti. If you're too detached, it's hard to make advancement. If you're too attached, it's also very difficult to make advancement. So we have to become naturally detached and naturally learned in devotional service. But we have to be very careful that it's not artificial. Without knowledge and detachment, we will be attached to the material body and tend to act for the body and not for Krishna's pleasure. Detachment can harden the heart and make it useless for devotional service. Yet detachment is necessary for achieving the desirelessness required for pure devotional service. Is it possible to acquire detachment without hardening the heart? So, obviously, we need to become detached from the material world and also soft-hearted. So these two things. So now Rupa Goswami is about to describe what is the type of vairagya that devotees practice. So now we're about to hear the famous verse. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Uchate. There's a very famous verse from the Nectar of Devotion. This verse describes what is real renunciation. Nirbandha. Nirbandha means a devotee should be renounced from those things which we cannot use in Krishna's service. There are some things we can't use in Krishna's service. Right? What are some examples? Like you can't eat meat in Krishna's service. Generally, that's very, very, very rare. I mean, Harikesh Prabhu came to Prabhupada one time in Vrindavan, and he was preaching in Romania or somewhere, like Eastern Bloc country, back in the 70s, which was communist era. And they had to wait in line for hours just to get cabbages and potatoes. That's all you could get. And it was hard. You get rations. So, most people ate meat because it was easier to attain. So he came back to Prabhupada and he said to Prabhupada, I'm trying to preach there, but it's almost impossible, very difficult because hardly anything to eat. It's such an endeavor just to get food we can offer to Krishna. Prabhupada said, then eat meat, right? But the preaching must continue. And Harikesh was shocked. And then he said to Prabhupada, what about my consciousness? Prabhupada said, damn your consciousness. The preaching must go on. So that's in the most extreme circuit. And he never ate meat. He went back and preached, but he never ate meat. But Prabhupada was making the point how important it was for the devotional activities to go on. Even, meat may be eaten in the most extreme circumstances to continue the preaching mission, the Sankirtan movement. But that's a very rare circumstance. It's not like it's an extraordinary circumstance. It's nothing that, I don't think any of us will hopefully have to go through in this lifetime. I can't foresee it, but, the world can change at any time. So, but, if we had to survive, we'd have to eat meat. That's the only way if we need to continue our bhakti. So the point is that nirbandha means those things which can't be connected to Krishna, they must be rejected. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandha. Sambandha means relationship. We say Sambandha Gyan. Means relationship. Krishna Sambandha. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe. If something can be related to Krishna, then we engage it in Krishna's service. If it can be connected to Krishna, then and you see, Prabhupada was the showed us the example of how so many things could be used in Krishna service. And we're seeing in the last few days, I think many of you must have been, are you conscious of that wedding which just took place in India? Oh, you haven't seen. The richest man in India, in Asia, one of the richest men in the world. His son just got married, and they invited Radhanath Swami, Jay Shetty, Gopal Prabhu, Gauranga Prabhu. They all went to the wedding and associated. So it's not the business of a sannyasi like Radhanath Swami to associate with apparently materialistic people. You know, to go to a wedding. I mean, this thing was the biggest event, maybe in history, maybe. $320 million wedding.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, probably bigger than even the royal family in England. Maybe even bigger than that.
Oh, yeah.
This thing was massive. And Kim Kardashian, Khloe Kardashian, I'm trying to think of other big names, but, you know, I mean, big people were there. Big, famous people were there. And many wealthy people there, and all of the Bollywood stars were there and everything. And maybe I'll share in our group, I'll show you that Jay Shetty, who's friends with these people, who's a devotee, he yesterday or the day before, he took Kim Kardashian and Khloe Kardashian to the Chowpatty temple, and they had darshan of the deities, offered flowers to Prabhupada's lotus feet, fed the children in the school, prasadam, took darshan of the deities, had darshan with Radhanath Swami.
Yeah, share that stuff. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I'll share it with you. So what's the business of a sannyasi to engage in associating with apparent materialists like this? But this is called yukta vairagya. If something can be engaged in Krishna's service, then we will do it. I mean, these devotees are amazing, what they're achieving, what they're doing. You know, they're associating with the most famous people on the planet, the richest, wealthiest people on the planet. You know, Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and all these people were there, and, you know, this is the influence they're having, their purity. So this is, as Prabhupada taught us, yukta vairagya. Right? Krishna sambandha. If something can be connected to Krishna, you connect it to Krishna. Now, what was the result? The result is massive exposure for the Hare Krishna movement. Massive exposure. Because the most famous people in the world are associating with the devotees. So why would we not take that opportunity? Of course, we're going to take the opportunity. But it requires genuine detachment. You see, like in His Holiness Radhanath Swami, there is genuine detachment. You know, it's not bewildered by these material facilities and so forth. So this is what Rupa Goswami is teaching us. And I was thinking how happy Prabhupada must be with these devotees, with the service they're doing, the exposure they're giving to the Hare Krishna movement, the donations, and the reputation they're securing for the Hare Krishna movement. It's massive, massive preaching. This is the principle of Krishna Sambandha, relating everything to Krishna. Those things that can be related to Krishna, we relate them. Those things that can't near Bandha, we reject them, we avoid them. Some things you can't use in Krishna service, some things. Some things you don't do in Krishna service, but most things you can connect to Krishna. Yukta vairagya uchate. This is called yukta vairagya. So it's renunciation by using things in Krishna's service. So we don't renounce things falsely. Just like, you know, one time there's a big guru in India, and there was a picture of him in the paper, and there was money all over the table. And there's a picture of him, he's going like this. Like, showing, oh, I'm detached. I'm not interested. And they showed it to Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada said, yes, and you should take a picture of me with all the money on the table, and I'm going like this. Because Srila Prabhupada said, this is what a real guru does, because he understands all that money is for Krishna's pleasure. Another story, which, we don't, we wouldn't say publicly maybe so much, but, Prabhupada had a number of bank accounts around the world. And there was one bank, and they gave Prabhupada they gave him a payment, but the bank made a mistake and they gave Prabhupada the payment twice. I think it was like $1,500 US or something. I can't remember the exact figure, but back then that's quite a lot of money. All right. So they gave it to him twice, came into his account twice. And the bank contacted Prabhupada. And they said, Swamiji, we made a mistake. Would you mind sending back? And Prabhupada said, no. He kept it because he understood that's Krishna's property. And then the bank manager contacted Prabhupada and said, it says in your book, Ishopanishad, you should only keep your quota. But Prabhupada understood a higher level, so he didn't, on that occasion, he chose not to give the money back. He kept it all and used it in Krishna's service. And Prabhupada said that if we make $1 million today, if I make $1 million in the morning, by the evening I'll have spent the whole thing, because there's so much I can use it for in Krishna's service. And he said, if I get another $1 million tomorrow, by the end of the day, I'll spend that by the end of it. That was his consciousness, his mentality. So this is how we should engage in Krishna service. Yukta Vairagya means if something can be used in Krishna service, then use it. In answer, Rupa Goswami quotes Bhagavatam 11:20, 32 and 33 to show that detachment and knowledge automatically come from bhakti. He then imparts his famous Yukta Vairagya verse, Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatartam Upayunjataha Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagyam Uchate. Things should be accepted for the Lord's service and not for one's sense gratification. This is the point. Prabhupada once said, we should not use a farthing, which means in this day it means like a cent. We should not spend 1 cent on our sense gratification. Prabhupada said, he actually wrote to Tamal Krishna Maharaj early on in the movement. He said, be very careful that the spirit of sense gratification does not enter in the name of bhakti. Sometimes we see that's happened in the history of our movement. The preaching's going very well, but then subtly the mood of sense gratification enters. Right? And then some of the gurus in the past in our movement and so forth, they've begun to become attached to spending money on their sense gratification, right? Their material enjoyment, accruing material facility. Right? So we have to be very careful that that spirit of sense gratification, it doesn't come in the name of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes, because Prabhupada pointed that out, we can say, we're using that in Krishna service. So you have to be very careful. The spirit of sense gratification doesn't come in the name of Krishna consciousness. Yukta Vairagya means to accept only those things that can be used in Krishna's service and to reject everything else. It is a balanced process of detachment by which a devotee acquires the qualities of knowledge and detachment without undergoing the heart-hardening processes of jnana and vairagya. On this path, the emotions are still engaged and they do not atrophy. But the emotions and activities engaged by Yukta Vairagya center exclusively on Krishna and therefore effectively extricate us from the mundane sphere. Thus, we can become attached to the Lord. So, as is being mentioned here, the emotions need to be cultivated. Spiritual emotion. In other words, attachment to Krishna. Right? Because, for example, a Mayavadi sannyasi, and Lord Chaitanya was criticized by Prakashananda Saraswati when he went to Benares. They said, why are you acting so sentimentally, so emotionally in public? They criticized Lord Chaitanya. Why are you acting like this? Why are you acting like a sentimental person? Your emotions are material. Emotion, or they basically say emotions are material. When one realizes Brahman, he doesn't become, extraordinarily ecstatic or happy, and he doesn't become dejected. Brahma Bhuta prasanatma na sochiti na kankshiti. He doesn't lament, he doesn't hanker. That's what we're aiming for. But Lord Chaitanya was dancing and chanting like a madman and showing all sorts of ecstatic emotions during this Sankirtan performance. We were reading last night in Chaitanya Charitamrita that when the Lord and Ramananda Roy were together, they were dancing, chanting, crying in each other's association. So much emotion was there in each other's association. So this is Yukta Vairagya. Using everything in Krishna's service, even your emotions, right? They're meant to be used for Krishna. We're not emotionless, but the emotions have to be connected and directed towards Krishna. Whereas impersonalists, they don't use their emotions in Krishna's service. They think it is Maya. Now, Rupa Goswami mentions Falgu Vairagya. What does Falgu Vairagya mean? Falgu means false. Just like in India, there's a river called the Falgu River. Because sometimes, like in the desert, the sand blows and it may blow across even the water. And then you can't really see the river flowing. But when you touch it, there's water there. So it's Falgu, the Falgu River. It's a false river. It doesn't look like it's a river, but actually it is. So Falgu Vairagya means false renunciation. Sometimes we give it other terms like Markat Vairagya. Markat means monkey renunciation. Like the monkey, Prabhupada explains. Lives naked, like Shukadeva Goswami was walking around naked. So lives naked, appears to be renounced, eats only fruit. So he's like a sage, lives in the forest, appears to be renounced, eats only fruit. But it's Markat Vairagya because he has so many female monkeys. You see the monkeys when you're in Vrindavan, they're having sex every few minutes. No sense control. Right? So therefore it is Falgu Vairagya, false renunciation. They act renounced. Oh, look at me, I'm renounced, but actually completely attached to this material world. Right? So Srila Rupa Goswami explains that rejecting something which could be used in Krishna's service is Falgu Vairagya, false renunciation. This is the type of renunciation that hinders the development of Bhakti. So this is called Falgu Vairagya, false renunciation. Especially when something can be used in Krishna's service, but it's not. We could use something in Krishna's service, but no, we renounce. Just like you may have an opportunity, like I remember when I was a brahmachari, some of the brahmacharis in the ashram, they wouldn't preach to women. Which, they say that's their ashram, they're protecting their ashram and so forth. So they wouldn't preach to women because they said that's Maya and it might increase their material desires. So, that's part of the brahmachari culture. But there were other brahmacharis who would preach to the women because they thought that, let's give them the opportunity to engage in Krishna's service. So which is better? If you can come to the genuine platform where you're actually renounced from this world, and you get, just like we're seeing with Radhanath Swami and the others at the moment, they're preaching to, members of the opposite sex and very famous people. Lord Chaitanya would not even see Maharaj Prataparudra. He said he's a pound, shillings, pence man. Right? He wouldn't even see him. And he was a king, like a very prominent person in society. Like these Ambani people who, the wedding they just went to, like these people are the most prominent, famous people, the richest man in India and all of Asia, one of the richest men in the world. It was $140 billion, I think, is the wealth, something like that. $320 million on the wedding. He hired 100 private jets to fly in all the guests. Right? Incalculable wealth from our perspective. So the renunciants, Radhanath Swami and the other, they could say, well, we have no place to associate with these materialistic-minded people. No, but they go in, even their renunciation is so perfect, let's engage everything in Krishna's service. Extraordinary. So this is real vairagya, not falgu vairagya, false renunciation. So in terms of wealth and followers, performing devotional service through one's wealth or followers is not an item of sadhana bhakti. A wealthy person may give a large donation to build a huge temple. This is certainly devotional service. However, he should not think that the subsequent activities performed therein, worshipping the deity, offering prasadam, etc., are his devotional service. If he becomes carried away by this misconception, his impetus for devotional service will slacken. So, we have to be very careful that we don't develop the misconception that just giving money is enough in devotional service. It's a very good start, if someone's wealthy and they give money, that's very good because they make advancement in Krishna consciousness. But for us who have become more progressed on the path of bhakti, that's not enough. Right? We have to do deity worship. Right? We have to chant the holy name. We have to study Bhagavatam. We have to associate with the devotees. We have to visit holy places, maintain holy places. That's our seva. Right? So someone should not think that, I gave so much money, now I am liberated. Sometimes you see that people think like that. I gave so much money now. No. That's wonderful that you did that, but now you have to do your sadhana. You have to chant your rounds, etc. Similarly, a spiritual master may train disciples to worship the deity. This is certainly devotional service. However, the worship they subsequently perform is their own devotional service, not his. If he does not understand this, his impetus for devotional service may slacken. It's an important point. Sometimes we assist others in coming to Krishna. So we assist other people. We help them to come to Krishna. But then once they've come to Krishna and they begin doing devotional service, they get the benefit for their bhakti, not us. But sometimes we might think. And we might think, I don't have to do so much bhakti anymore because my followers, someone I made a devotee, they're doing bhakti. I'm getting the benefit. People might think like that. So you have to be careful of this kind of mentality. Srila Prabhupada writes on page 116, if a spiritual master is not properly authorized and only on his own initiative becomes a guru, he may be carried away by an accumulation of wealth and large numbers of disciples. His is not a very high grade of devotional service. If a person is carried away by such achievements, then his devotional service may become slackened. So this is something that some devotees may have to they'll be challenged with. If you have disciples and if you have wealth accumulated by having disciples, you may become attached to that. And then you may become slack in your devotional service because you think, by my potency, all this is taking place. So I don't have to worry about, how seriously I chant my rounds and things like that. So we're being warned here by Prabhupada and Rupa Goswami. So the concept of yama means restraint from passions. It includes activities such as ahimsa, non-violence, brahmacharya, celibacy, satyam, truthfulness, etc. These restraints are not items of sadhana bhakti because they do not in themselves impel devotion to manifest in the heart. On the contrary, practice of devotional service impels these practices to manifest. So we can't think, like, I'm celibate, so therefore I'm qualified to serve Krishna. No, the qualification is the service, not the practice of celibacy itself. There's an example in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. He was doing kirtan, nocturnal kirtan in Srivasangam, and Srivas Thakur had a brahmachari there who was hiding. And he was very renounced brahmachari. It said he only lived on milk and fruits. That's all he would eat, just milk and fruits. So Lord Chaitanya was doing kirtan with his devotees as he would every night. And then he stopped the kirtan. He said, I'm not feeling ecstasy. He said, there is someone here who is unqualified, detracting from the mood of the kirtan. And he looked at Srivas Thakur. Srivas Thakur said, well, actually, I did invite a brahmachari who's hiding just there. And he hasn't joined the kirtan yet, but he's observing it. And he's very renounced, only eats milk and fruits. Lord Chaitanya said, if I could go to Krishna just by eating milk and fruits, I would do it. But that is not the process. The process is to perform prema sankirtan, loving chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Remove him immediately. So Srivas Thakur took him out and shut the gate. And the brahmachari had a change of heart. In his heart, he thought, what a fool I am. I was so close to Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, I could not enter because of my pride of thinking I'm a greatly renounced personality. So then because his heart was changed, Lord Chaitanya detected, he said to Srivas, bring him back. So he came back and he joined in the kirtan again. So the point is being made here that you may practice truthfulness or non-violence or brahmacharya, but they are not completely significant unless you perform these things in service to Krishna. Right? If they're not connected to Krishna, then they don't have potency. If they're connected to Krishna, they have potency. Prabhupada writes on page 116, a vegetarian is not necessarily a devotee, nor is a non-violent person, but a devotee is automatically both vegetarian and non-violent. We must conclude, therefore, that vegetarianism or non-violence is not the cause of devotion. So Prabhupada said this, we are not vegetarians, we are prasadarians. We only take prasad. We're not just we shouldn't preach just vegetarianism. Right? That's a good start for many people, but we preach prasadarian, that one should offer the food to Krishna. To affirm this point, Srila Rupa Goswami cites the story of the hunter who became a great devotee, Ragrari the hunter. Yeah, Ragrari the hunter. Ragrari became a devotee by the mercy of Narad Muni. Ekanga and Anekanga. Before concluding his description of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, Srila Rupa Goswami explains that devotional service can be practiced by concentrating primarily on one of the items, ekanga, or by concentrating equally on all the items, anekanga. So this bhakti is so powerful. Even just doing one of the 64 items can take you back to Godhead if you do it with pure devotion. Right? Just chanting the holy name, or just studying the Bhagavatam, or just worshipping the deity, or residing in a holy place, or associating with devotees. If you do these things with pure devotional mentality, you can go back home, back to Godhead. That's the potency. Just one of these items. Or you can do all of them or many of them. Right? And they're so powerful, it can take you back to Godhead. The alternate terminology, some authorities use the phrase Mayada Marga as an alternative term for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Srila Rupa Goswami, this is page 118, Srila Rupa Goswami says that the regulative principles of devotional service are sometimes described by authorities as the path of serving the Lord in opulence. So he's speaking about other Vaishnav traditions. We are Gaudiya Vaishnavas, but there are other Vaishnav traditions also. And they may have different, like in the Ballabha Sampradaya, when you go to Vrindavan, when you go to Govardhan Hill, there are Gaudiya Vaishnavas, which is our tradition. And then there are also some Ballabha Sampradaya devotees. And their emphasis is different to the Gaudiyas. The Gaudiyas, our main emphasis is Prema Sankirtan, chanting the holy name of Krishna. That was Lord Chaitanya's methodology to become Krishna conscious. But some, like for example, the Ballabha Sampradaya, their focus is primarily on deity worship, opulent deity worship. That's what's that? Yeah, but even in Kali Yuga, that's in their sampradaya, that's the emphasis. They become purified by nice deity worship. And you go to their temples, like nice standards of deity worship. So that's their emphasis. So different traditions have different emphasis, and therefore it's all sadhana bhakti, it's all Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, but the mood is different, the names may be different, or the emphasis may be different. But in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, the emphasis Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave was Harinam Anukirtanam. right, to chant the holy names of Krishna. So next week we'll begin the chapters on Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we finish?
So is that why, you know, I guess I can speak for a couple of ladies that I know, they can feel quite treated quite harshly by some men or some brahmacharis especially, like they just kind of shun them. So that's quite a good, what you cleared up tonight is that, you know, that renunciation hardens the heart. Yeah, so you can see some brahmacharis, you know, say devotee men, they're very sweet, very caring, and very conscientious of all devotees, regardless of gender. So we can see their heart's quite soft. So that's the proper use, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the right mood.
Right mood, proper use of that vairagya.
Yeah.
What can't be used in Krishna service and what can be used in Krishna service.
Yeah.
One is right and the other is unright. One is hard and the other one is soft.
Yeah, so we have to see within ourselves that we're becoming more soft-hearted.
So devotional, so the bhakti is right. This is what I'm trying to get. What I'm trying to understand my own heart. Is that the bhakti is ripe in terms of like it's realized.
Yeah, ripening.
Ripening.
Yeah, you're getting closer to the goal. Like we have to see that we're getting genuinely renounced, our material desires are becoming less, and we're becoming soft-hearted over time. Yeah, we have to analyze ourselves.
I think Guru Jumper is so amazingly beautiful. Soft. It's like he's really understood philosophy so well. It wouldn't matter what you were. You know what I mean? He's just really soft-hearted. So I think that's a nice analogy for me.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Jai.
We'll see you next week. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai. Thank you all for coming. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.